man. John Dailey back on the podcast. Thanks again for coming on. Your book, Tough Rugged Bastards. Everybody could check that out. You were, I remember now. I said that. I got a copy of it before you did, right? Did you get a copy eventually?
I do. I've got, in fact, Simon & Schuster had a box of like 40 copies that showed up yesterday.
Oh, nice.
So I've, got obviously some people to send them out to, and people that have helped me out and things. So that was good. But yeah, you were as far as I know, the first person to have an official copy.
That's awesome. That's so crazy. I really like it. I think it's a good cover and everything. I like how they did it. Was it easy working with Simon & Schuster?
It was. So Simon & Schuster distributes it. I have the publisher is actually Knox Press. It's a relatively small press that kind of fall up under Simon & Schuster for distribution. So it was, the cover, like I'm not a big fan of covers that like have your picture on the front. Oh, plus yeah. I really didn't have any really cool pictures. So I told them that
how do you not have any cool photos? What are you talking about?
I was in, by the time I retired, cell phones were really just kind of becoming ubiquitous. So, like I don't think, I think I went to Iraq with a digital camera, like an early, relatively early digital camera, but it was very poor quality. The sand destroyed it quickly. Afghanistan, I had a film camera that and I was just never the guy. There was always the guy who was taking photos of everybody or asking people to take pictures of him, and that was just never me, which I totally regret. I mean, I've got pictures that other people took and gave me, but I don't have a lot of great pictures, and that's something that I wish I would have thought a little bit more about.
I think that's a universal thing amongst veterans is they look back and go, damn, I wish I would have taken more photos. And then they tell like guys that are coming up, like, make sure you're taking photos with you and your buddies,
Yeah. And it's become a lot easier. It's become so much easier to do now when everybody's walking around with a phone in your pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. And these phones nowadays, I mean, the camera quality on it is out of control. I mean, some of them are really, you could just take professional level photos. The only difference between this and like a digital camera is like the photo I take on my phone, I might not necessarily be able to blow up to like a billboard size photo.
All right.
But I can make one that I put on my wall really easily. That's the difference, the resolution there. But yeah, man. But anyways, I really appreciate you coming on. Like we talked about a second ago, we stopped around. We talked about you and your team going to Afghanistan, your reconnaissance element in Afghanistan. You guys were like one of the first elements into Afghanistan after 9/11. And then we jumped ahead because we're running out of time to talk about Det 1 a little bit. But I want to talk more about that time at Recon because I think that's really important. And I know you guys did a lot of work, not just in Afghanistan, but like in Iraq and everything. Can you start with what was it like to be one of the first guys on the ground in Afghanistan? Like did it dawn on you that this was like how important this was?
Absolutely. I told a story last time that I was, already on deployment when sitting in a pub in Darwin, Australia, when the attacks happened. So we saw it on television. With the time difference, it was like 9 p.m. So we're sitting around drinking beer and we see that. And kind of knew, instantly that, our deployment wasn't going to be a normal deployment, right? And that we were going to find ourselves somewhere. We didn't quite know where at the time, and that information was pretty quick in coming. Our ships that we were on steamed over that way, and I think as early as I forget when the Army Special Forces landed, but the ships that were within our amphibious ready group were, launching rockets and things into Afghanistan, and we weren't far behind, launching aircraft and things like that.
I think the Army guys got there. I think I want to say they were there by December and maybe even earlier. I think maybe it was absolutely. October.
Yeah, they were already on the ground when we got there in November,
Okay,
mid to
that's
late
what it is.
November.
Okay.
So they were there. We landed somewhere around Thanksgiving.
Okay.
You know, we got our first boots on the ground, and you know, not a lot of idea of what to expect. You know, because it was obviously just a completely different kind of war than we'd been accustomed to. You know, but we landed and set up our camp for the Marine Expeditionary Unit out in a absolutely desolate section of desert. It's called the Registrarian Desert, I think, and it had been a location that at one point was, you know, wasn't as arid and had a lot more activity, a lot more people that lived in it, but they had a really big drought several years, 10 years prior to that. So what we came into was this old camp that had been like a hangout for wealthy Afghani families. You know, they would bring their falcons out and fly around, and so it had an airstrip. It had a compound with guard towers and things on it. So we land at this remote desert airstrip, and as soon as we did, sent two of my teams out to kind of secure the perimeter and implant seismic intrusion sensors. So little sensors that they would ping us, if people tripped them, in vehicles or on foot. So we established security, and then the entire Marine Expeditionary Unit. You're talking, 1,000 Marines start, landing, and the infantry battalion starts digging fighting positions and security perimeter. We were fortunate, I guess, enough to get one of the few hardened structures to sleep in, but it was Spartan living conditions. So I had 30 guys sleeping in the space of probably this room that I'm in, but we weren't living out in foxholes, so we fighting holes with the Marines from the BLT, the Battalion Landing Team. So we had that going for us. But November, December, it was really, really cold. And we were not well prepared. We hadn't, we brought with us, normally when we would go on a deployment like that, we would spend a lot of time in the Pacific, and then we would maybe go to some of the warmer parts of the Gulf. We'd go to Kuwait or and do some training, Jordan perhaps. But so we hadn't really prepared for that level of cold. So that was kind of the first hurdle that we had to get over.
Yeah.
And you got, I had told my guys, and we had packed probably more cold weather gear than anyone else had. So we were more, far better prepared. But still, it was, we weren't quite ready for that, for what we ran into of, almost zero, sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah, I remember being in Marja in 2011, and in December it snowed, and I just remember being like, fuck, it's so cold here. Like, this is crazy, especially after you go through the summertime, because when we got there in the summer, it was really hot. So it does have those extremes. It's a tough environment. I mean, you talk about Spartan living. That's really the way to go, though, because I remember, again, on my 2011 deployment, flying into like Leatherneck, and it's built up, and they have like the green bean coffee and like the fast food stuff and everything. And that was never appealing for me. I was like, what the hell is this? You know what I'm saying? Like, moving forward to FOB Marja, and then on my other deployment into Sangin, which was probably my worst living conditions I had, but best deployment. That's just such a much better lifestyle, I think, because there's less distractions, and it seems like it means something. I don't know. It feels weird when you're like surrounded by creature comforts all day. You know what I'm saying? Like, is it like we're at war? I was in Iraq in 2009 as a mechanic before I lat moved, and I was at TQ Al Taqaddum, and we had like a couple chow halls and like a shitty PX and stuff like that. And I still felt that way. I was like, this is cool and all, but this isn't what I envisioned,
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah,
think what you're talking about is a much better thing.
yeah. Afghanistan was that way. I mean, it obviously grew up, but it was in those early days. It was fascinating to watch. The Marine Corps has these guys called MAGTF planners, and the Navy has like load planners. So they would sit there with computers and figure out like, hey, we need whatever 2 crates of toilet paper or 2 pallets of toilet paper to go on this next C-130 flight, or we need this many batteries. We need to get 4 people out there, and it was I mean, all comes down to space and weight. So they would pull things off, put things on, and really they were kind of in the early days, those guys were the heroes and heroines of the making sure that the right stuff got there. But what that meant was that, and you're right, that's what you expect, and that's what everybody expected until things started, kind of going crazy. But the time that we were there, we ate nothing but MREs. Christmas came, and there was somebody had told us that they were going to send out steaks, or they were going to send out something for Christmas, and something a priority came up, and it wound up being like batteries or something else that was necessary. But Christmas morning, we're waiting on this plane to come in, thinking that it's going to have steaks or have some sort of break.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case. But what happened now? What we found out later that happened was one of the refueling locations. All of these aircraft were flying in with steaks, and at this refueling location, they would, a priority would come up, and they'd have to maneuver their load, and so this small detachment of guys in the Pakistani desert just had eaten nothing but steaks for months.
Getting all jacked.
When we finally flew through there, they're like, "Oh man, do you want some steak? We're really sick of it. We'll trade you an MRE," because that was all they were getting.
That's funny. That's for the gains, though. Out there eating protein.
Yeah.
That's that's good times. Yeah. Again, it's just I remember being like in Iraq, and I remember guys bitching about like, oh, the Wi-Fi doesn't work or whatever, and I'm like, dude, we're in a war zone. Shut the fuck up. Like, there's dudes out there sleeping in shitty like fighting positions and stuff like that, and you're complaining that the Wi-Fi in your can doesn't work. Like your, what do they call those, containerized housing units?
Yeah.
The chew. And until I got to go to like Afghanistan and do that was my MLG life, and I was just miserable because that's not what I wanted to do. So it was a hard pill to swallow to listen to guys complain about their living conditions when I knew that there were dudes out there fighting and doing stuff and living in shitty conditions. And I really like appreciated it, even though like we were starving and saying it, and we had like it sucked. The like living conditions kind of sucked. I remember having a mouse run over my face while I was sleeping and stuff because there's like creatures, But that was the best because all the other bullshit, there was no like distractions. It was like, do your job, go on missions, find the bad dudes, train the Afghans. It was very basic.
Yeah.
I would much rather do that again than go to some base that has all the creature comforts.
Yeah, definitely a lot to be said for that. We when we went into Iraq, we were kind of on the outskirts of it, so we had the opportunity to drive into nicer chows or to go to the PX, but it was rare. We just were pretty well self-contained at that point, and it was you're right. I mean, distractions distract you from your mission. So that's
making PX runs and whatnot. When you guys were on your way to Afghanistan, what was the intelligence like? What was like the rumor mill like on ship? It had to have been out of control.
There was, and it was it ran the gamut. So we would get, as the Force Recon platoon, at one point we were, I can't even remember now. We were needed to rescue some American citizens. We were preparing, and that was a lot of the transit over there. There was this, the State Department and Americans, NGAs or NGOs were trying to figure out where all the Americans were in the country and figure a way to get them out. And so we spent a lot of our time kind of preparing for missions to go in and extract Americans from. There's like a small consulate, I think, in Lahore. There's just different locations that there was concern about their safety and their welfare, and as because we were the first ones that they were going to be arriving in country, they wanted us to do that. And then I don't know what became of that, but as we started approaching Afghanistan, that requirement went away. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if someone else took care of it, or if they were able to get themselves out, or if what happened. But then our focus shifted to as a force reconnaissance unit, to reconnaissance, finding the bad guys, pinpointing them so that we could bring in airstrikes or bring in the infantry to hit them. And that's what we were most prepared for, doing kind of long range desert patrolling in vehicles, and identifying enemy positions. And we did some of that, but not as much as we had thought, I guess.
Do you think you were utilized properly there? Do you think you could have been better employed? I mean, obviously for those that haven't, if you haven't read about the early days in Afghanistan, there's a really good book called Jawbreaker, which is about the CIA going in. And then I think they touch a little bit on the Green Beret teams that go in as well. But they were very busy. They were very much like in the fight and working with the locals and stuff like that. You guys weren't really doing that so much, right?
No, we were down further south.
Yeah.
So and we were limited, of course, at least initially, by the need to get a kind of a major military foothold in the country. So the Green Berets and everyone else that was in were kind of coming in from other routes. We were all on boats, so we had to come in from where we could. Mm-hmm. So we were coming into Pakistan and then flying into this camp. And the initial mission really was to kind of build up forces, to get enough people there to start operating. And that's what we did. And I felt like we were used as well as we could be. Mm-hmm. At the time. I mean, we got to do, like I said, some reconnaissance missions, a lot of those, and that's our bread and butter. And then once and like I said, implanting seismic intrusion devices and sensors and things of that nature. And then when we realized, or I guess the focus shifted a little bit. So we arrived, and then a second Marine expeditionary unit arrived, and we'd really kind of built up enough combat power to, make an impact in Kandahar. So that's what we did.
Being the first like recon team there, and this is like the real first engagement for American forces since the Gulf War. I imagine you guys were testing a lot of new TTPs or testing theory. There was a lot of stuff you probably had in theory, this is what we should do, and then you actually went out and did it. Did it change your TTPs at all? Did you pass on a lot of info to the team that was following you to, hey, we tried this, don't do it, do this instead? How much did it rewrite the recon, TTPs, I guess?
Yeah, not a lot. I mean, we had always done some, and probably the biggest area was in desert vehicle mounted patrolling. Mm-hmm. We would normally, during our training prior to a deployment, we'd do a patrol or two, but no, it was usually a couple of days up in Fallon, Nevada or Yuma, Arizona. We hadn't done consistent operations, so there were a lot of lessons that were learned just from vehicle maintenance. How do you keep vehicles going over that duration? Mm-hmm. In Afghanistan, we ran into like bad fuel, a lot of either, I don't know if it was old or whatever, but fuel was burning at a much more rapid rate than we'd anticipated. It's just some of we did have relatively new vehicles that were called the fast attack vehicles. The Marine Corps had purchased. They're really a Mercedes G-Wagon is the military variant of that, small enough that they could fit into our helicopters, and we could get 2 into a helicopter, and that was helpful. But it's also, I mean, tiny. It's a tiny vehicle, so trying to get a team and their equipment loaded. So we did learn a lot of lessons about how to pack, how to operate in small two vehicle teams. There were some. My platoon we had recently switched from the M4. We had got the M4 maybe a year or so before. So in the past, we would always deploy with both an M16 for reconnaissance work, and HK MP5 was our kind of weapon of choice for hostage rescue and things of that nature. So going to the M4 was, we learned a lot about that, kind of putting it through its paces as really before the Marine Corps adopted it as a whole. And then my platoon was the first to adopt, and we were working with the U.S. Army's Natick Laboratories, the Mitch helmet and the Mitch communication system, the mobile or modular integrated communication helmet, I think is what Mitch stands for.
Oh, really? I never even knew what it stood for.
Yeah, modular integrated communication helmet.
That makes sense.
And that was, phenomenal. A phenomenal ability for me. I was able to talk on two radios at a time, talk to my teams or talk to the air, and relatively seamlessly. So yeah, there was some new gear we were using, new things we were learning that absolutely and I've always been really, really big on making sure that we capture lessons learned. And when I got back, or when we got back to the States, we spent a lot of the transit back, just sitting down, putting our heads together. What are the things that we learned? I mean, we were really the first Force Recon platoon to have been in any kind of real. I mean, there was some people doing some shooting in Somalia, right? There was absolutely some guys doing some stuff in the first Gulf War, but the first real kind of significant engagements since Vietnam, nearly. So there was a lot. So we spent a lot of our time on the way back and the months, sailing back, just sitting down, kind of documenting everything, and then presenting it kind of over and over to each platoon, to kind of anybody that would listen, hey, here's the things that we learned. Here's, it was really cool. We had plenty of C4, and the thing I had always thought was super cool in the Vietnam books was, using C4 to cook your chow or heat up your, coffee. So, that was something that, came in handy.
You're like, oh, I want to try this. I read it in a book one time.
Yeah, and I did, and it worked like a charm.
Yeah, what do? They pull off a little pinch and then just catch it on fire and it burns or something like that? I remember reading that too. Yeah,
as long as if you stomp it out while it's on fire, there's the potential, probably a pretty low potential. It's a relatively safe explosive, but it worked much better than anything else. Or we, like I said, we weren't planning to go into that sort of weather, so like we didn't have stoves or anything that you would take if you were going there intentionally.
That's crazy too. And for those that are listening that were in the military, also remember this is the earliest days with the oldest gear. This is like old school. You got 782 Deuce gear or whatever, like all the old school stuff that we would look at now and be like, holy crap, that's what you carried? Like how was it, technology and gear shifted so much over that 20 years. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of the start of it. Just before we left, because we had in 1998 at First Force Recon Company, we had a helicopter crash with a bunch of our guys on it, 7 of our guys, and some pilots, or not the pilots, but the crew chiefs of the aircraft. They were doing a shipboarding, and the aircraft came in too low. The skid caught the safety netting that ran around the aircraft, and it rolled over, and a couple of the guys got out, and a lot of them didn't. And the reason that they didn't was because the equipment that we were wearing at that time was just insanely heavy. it was a lot of the kind of what we called our close quarter battle gear, or bullet bouncers and things were equipment that was built around what police officers wore. So at that point, following that, the Marine Corps said, "Hey, we need to do something different." So I was fortunate to be sent, one of the guys to be the representative from First Force Recon, to go to Quantico and developed what came to be known as the full spectrum battle equipment. And that was where the Molly webbing came from. And we didn't invent that, but it was, we kind of picked and choose throughout, everybody in the DOD, what they had. The Mitch helmet, that's where that came from. So we went in with definitely a higher level of gear than we would have had, several years before. But yeah, the amount of innovations and changes that happened, it was a curve that really hadn't moved in a long time. And it, between 98 and 2020, I mean, it was just on a huge straight up glide path on new things being built, new lessons being learned.
Were you guys, what you guys established, was that was camp? I think it was called Camp Rhino. Is that what they ended up calling it? Was Mattis in charge while you were there of that?
He was. So we landed, and it was shortly after we landed. In fact, like I said, right when we landed, I sent out the first recon patrol. I wasn't on it, but I sent out two of my teams, and they came in, while they were still out. Mattis landed, and I don't know where he came from, but he landed and was obviously in charge of kind of all ground forces. And when my guys came back in from that patrol, there were two of them that needed to, I think one was getting promoted and one had to re-enlist. And that's, doing that in a combat zone is a cool thing.
Yeah.
And they were adamant. They're like, "Hey, we just came off this patrol. We've got, beards we haven't shaved in like a week or whatever. This is the way that we want to do this." And I'm like, "Man, it's your call. I mean, you're the one re-enlisting. Yeah, you could do it how you want." And the sergeant major of the Marine Expeditionary Unit was, he's like, "Hey, well, why don't we get Mattis to come and do it?" And he came. We got pictures with him. Then, of course, he wasn't. I don't even know that he was called Mad Dog at the time. It wasn't.
His legend status hadn't been established yet.
Yeah, it hadn't. But there were people running around bitching and moaning that my guys hadn't shaved or whatever. But he was the least of his worries. He was pulled us around and asked us what we need. And the big thing that they had learned already was that, hey, the tires that we have on these Mercedes vehicles are insufficient for the terrain, right? There's a lot really, really soft sand, and you needed bigger tires that you could deflate. And and he was like, "Hey, that's why I got," and he only had one star on his collar at the time, but he's like, "That's why I've got this." And he made some calls. Some tires were shipped in from Italy or someplace, and we awesome. Got the equipment that we needed pretty quickly. So that was my first and only real interaction with him. But nothing bad to say about General Mattis.
I was gonna ask, because there's a thing I always heard, because everyone sings his praises, General Mattis and stuff, but I always heard through, like, I don't know, just chatter out there, that some of the special operations units didn't care for Mattis because when he was at Rhino, there was a unit that got compromised or something happened, and there was a QRF at Rhino, but he refused to send it out to help him. I don't know if you know anything about that or if you've ever heard that before, but I don't know if I was just wondering if you've even heard of that.
We were standing by to go into Tora Bora, and we were actually supposed to parachute in.
That would have been wild.
Yeah, it would have been. But a couple of weeks, things had happened. So right before our deployment, we were doing a some parachute training, and we were doing a military free fall jump, and I was actually on the drop zone as the drop zone safety officer for it. And the plane flies by, the jump master, calls down, hey, we've like 7 parachutists out. And, my job is to sit there and count and see we've got 7 parachutes open. But we didn't. We had 6. And, 30 seconds later, you can see, a body without a parachute falling really fast. And he hits the ground kind of beyond a little hill. And it was one of the Marines in our platoon, Jonathan Bates.
Damn.
It was relatively new out of military free fall school, but had kind of had all of the training and everything that he needed. We're not sure what happened with his main parachute. His reserve parachute it's called an automatic opening device that should have opened it, and it fired, but it's essentially there's a cable that pulls out a series of grommets that hold the parachute closed, and this was a mechanical device that was supposed to pull that pin out, which would have allowed the parachute to open. It did that, but the cable for some reason was like 2 microns too long, and so it didn't clear the loop necessary to allow the parachute to open.
Damn.
So the impact, of course, caused the parachute. So when we get out there, his parachute's laying over top of him. Obviously he was deceased, and because of that, all of our free fall parachutes were deadlined. Right, they had to do an investigation, get to the bottom of what had caused this.
Yeah.
So by the time we deployed, we didn't have our parachutes. So it was maybe like a month after we left on deployment that they cleared the equipment to be used. And so when we recognized that there was a potential of us jumping in the Tora Bora, we said, hey, we need our free fall parachutes. And a Marine from the States volunteered to take 30 parachutes, get on a plane with them, and fly them out and cart them around until he finally linked up with us in Afghanistan. And he was a great friend of mine, so it was good to see him. So he showed up with our parachutes. He operated with us for a little while and then went home. But it was at least considered, that we jump into Tora Bora to relieve the, provide some QRF and some relief during that battle. But part of it was aircraft availability and the elevation, the ability of Marine aviation to get up that high. I've heard rumblings of it, but I'm not 100% sure on when I certainly wasn't privy to Mattis's decision to not send us. I know it was discussion was it was Christmas Day. I mean, we were kind of planning for, hey, we'll do this on Christmas Day, and that's didn't come to pass. Like I said,
that's crazy about the parachute, man. I mean, that sucks anytime, and it seems like that happens every couple years, right? Like a recon guy or somebody going through military free fall or somebody doing military free fall training, like some kind of accident occurs, and that's one of those. It seems like one of those things that anything could happen, right? Like one little error. I mean, even regular skydivers that jump hundreds or thousands of times, sometimes they get killed because something happens that was outside of their control. It's just one of those freak. There was a girl actually the other day who was a skydive instructor up in Paris, here in California, who passed away because she was tandem jumping with someone. And on her way in, I think like 50 feet off the ground or something like that, hit a dust devil, and it collapsed her chute and killed her. But the dude she was jumping with survived. And it's like that kind of thing you can't. I mean, how do you plan for that, right? Like,
it's dangerous activities come with risks.
That's why you get the extra $150 a month or $200 a month, whatever it is.
Which is worth it until it isn't, and that's, I was when I was going through free fall school, we had got a couple jumps and we were out in Yuma, Arizona, and there's instructors came kind of rushing back with the students, and we were all told to gather in the packing room where we were packing our parachutes. And I was the class leader. So each service had its leader, right? So the SEALs had their senior guy, the Air Force, Army, obviously, but for some, I had been picked as the overall class leader. So I'm like, they're all kind of giving me the thumbs up that they've got everybody, and I'm sitting there counting all the Marines, and we're all there. So I'm like, we're supposed to have whatever 54 students. We have 54 students. I'm like, so what's going on? And so I'm standing in the back of the group, and one of the instructors walks up to the front and says, "Hey, you're all sitting in here because we had a fatality. Staff Sergeant Dailey died." And there was an instructor named Staff Sergeant Dailey, Air Force instructor. Yeah. Of course, I was also Staff Sergeant Dailey at the time, so I was like, man, and this was a guy who was a absolute professional with thousands of jumps and hadn't done anything wrong, just something happened. So there's always there's always that risk.
Yeah, that's inherent dangers of the job, right? I try to tell people that all the time, especially when we talk about fire support and stuff. I'm like, you're lobbing 100-pound rounds down range that are going to explode somewhere. So things could happen that make that not work the way it's supposed to. Just another aspect of the job that's just inherently dangerous. And yeah, that's crazy. I mean, so I know you guys pack your own chutes at military freefall school. When you're back in the fleet, do you guys have the what do they call them, the paraloft guys?
The riggers.
The riggers. Do they normally do it, or do you guys share responsibility on that?
We kind of share it. So we will, especially if we're doing a series of jumps, we'll pack our own. So you're allowed to jump a chute that you packed, or you're allowed to jump one that a rigger packed. Like I am not supposed to. I don't know if it shouldn't happen where I pack one that you jump. That's not the way it works. So it's normally the first time you go out to jump, it'll be one that a rigger has packed, and then and they're the pros. I would much rather let them do it because they absolutely know what they're doing. I mean, it's not it's incredibly complicated, but they're really good at it. They can do it rapidly. I'm always having to call them over to double check to make sure I'm not screwing something up.
I mean, rightfully so, right? I mean,
yeah, you got that's one of the things they say in free fall school is if you have whatever problem you have, you got the rest of your life to figure it out.
Yeah, that's one way to put it, I suppose. Has like parachute technology changed much since the war, the global war on terror started? I know the static line chute in the Marine Corps changed to a new variant, but besides that, has there been much difference in like parachute technology?
There's been changes. There's not a ton of difference in technology. The big changes are whether you're pulling a ripcord or whether you're throwing out a drogue chute. And there's different variants of where the drogue chute is, and the Marine Corps is there have been issues with the current parachute, and it's been deadline for safety concerns for a little while. But,
oh, really? Currently it is?
No, I don't think it is. It's not currently, but it was for a while. And we're MARSOC's in a unique environment because we have there are various SOCOM parachutes that are used, and then there's the Marine Corps parachute. So we're currently using what the Marine Corps provides. But there have been absolutely advances in technology with remotely piloted parachutes for bringing in resupplies and things of that nature. There's just a couple weeks or months ago now, I guess, down at SOF Week in Tampa, there was a big demonstration of Marine Raiders flying in on powered parachutes with kind of the big fan. You could take off like an aircraft.
Oh yeah.
And that's the kind of the latest and greatest. I mean, it's really, really cool technology.
I think my buddy helped with that. And he was on. He may or may not have. I could be wrong, but if you want to hear more about that kind of thing, John Isley, who's one of my friends, he was on my advisor team. He was a logistics Marine officer, and now he teaches paramotor flying. He lives up in Wisconsin, and he was telling me about that. And I remember watching his videos and other videos and thinking like, wow, that's a really interesting way to do an insertion. You know, and before that was even, you know, an idea that was out there. And
and then we played around with them in the 90s. So I mean, we were experimenting with them in the 90s, but they had a lot of issues. Yeah.
Yeah, the tech. Yeah, and then I think we saw it in real life when October 7th, right? When Hamas went into Israel. That's one of the methods that they came in on. They came in on those, and they came in on the little, what do you call them, ultralights or whatever, that look like hang gliders with motors on them too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so crazy. I mean, that's an interesting way to do it. I feel like they're gonna have to work on making the motors quiet on them though, like a little bit quieter, because they are pretty loud. Which the whole point of parachuting in, right, is that you're pretty quiet. You're coming in silently, especially if you jump in at night and stuff. Yeah, I mean, how often you're in that world. Are there a lot of examples of doing free fall into combat zones, like actual like combat jumps with military free fall?
There are examples. There are not a ton of them. The Marine Corps, I think, did one in Iraq, and to my knowledge, that was the only combat jump that had been done since Vietnam for the Marine Corps. There are certainly people that are using it as a way to get into places, but it's one of those skills that you can't build when you need it.
Yeah.
Like diving and jumping are hugely time, money, requirement, resource intensive skills, but they're the only way to get in when they're the only way to get in. Mm-hmm. And you have to have them. One of the challenges in Force Recon and Marine Recon, the motto is that we're jacks of all trades and masters of none. And that's there's so many things that you have to know. You can't stay on top of everything all the time. Mm-hmm. So that's why pre-mission or pre-deployment training is really important, because then you have time to anticipate where you think you're going, what you think you're going to need, and refine those skills. Like I said, we weren't anticipating jumping in to Afghanistan, so we didn't have the equipment, and it had to be brought in, because it had been deadline, but we had not done a lot of obviously, because we didn't have the parachutes, we hadn't done any recent training. So that was one of the demands that I had, is if we were going to jump into the mountains, then we at least needed to do a rehearsal or two kind of before we took off, because that's a very, especially free fall, it's a very I've seen it happen too many times. Something happens to somebody's parachute, they can find themselves very far away from the main body, especially when you're doing it at night into an unmarked drop zone.
Yeah that's I think you said it right. You have to constantly practice and just be ready to go, and rather than try to build someone up out of scratch when the time comes. It's I don't know, it's just such a, that's like, I never did jump while I was in. Some of my Anglico guys we sent to jump school, but it was all static line. And I really had no want to even do static line. I was like, that doesn't even look, I don't know what the big deal is. Like, that doesn't look fun at all. Like, that looks like every time I'm jumping, I'm possibly breaking my leg or my back. Now military free fall seems like it would have been cool, because that seems like a more fun way to jump out of an airplane rather than just jump out and hope for the best,
Yeah, it's unfortunately you've got to get through the static line gate before you can jump free fall. But I was never in love with it, the way that some people are. I've never done, civilian skydiving.
Yeah.
As I really, every time if I'm doing something like that, I want to be, a little bit scared.
Yeah.
I don't want to get to the point where it's just a commonplace. I want to have a little bit of fear in me so that I'm, making sure that I'm thinking through everything that needs to be done. Because, and for me, the inside the plane, I would be, I would do everything that I needed to do, but I was scared. I was scared inside the plane. Once you jump out, then that kind of, it's all in your hands, and that's really
you're
what
doing at that point.
Yeah. So you've got, like I said, you've got the rest of your life to figure out any issues that you have.
Now you made a comment about Recon being, jack of all trades kind of deal, and that is true. You guys have a million roles that are required. You got guys that, everything from obviously shooting, communicating, breaching, JTACs, jumping, diving, that, on and on and on. Now, isn't it though, like, you want to kind of train your guys all like wave top at least on all those subjects, and then you designate certain guys like this is the jump team, this is the dive team, and those guys specifically work on that. So if the call comes, we have a group of dudes that are truly professionals at that one thing, while the rest of the guys are getting spun up, breaking the rust and getting a little bit more training. Is that kind of the deal?
Yeah. Yeah. Normally that would be the way that a force recon platoon would be broken down: a jump team, dive team, and a vehicle team, maybe. And sometimes that would, change a little bit, but, yeah, the guys in the jump team were always jumping and be very proficient at that skill set. I did not love diving either, but somehow I always found myself in the dive team. And diving, it's a lot less scary, I think, to me than jumping, but there's it's actually a lot more dangerous in my opinion. There's
really?
There's a lot more things that can go wrong. I'd say probably a less likelihood of kind of instant death than parachuting has, but there's just so many more things that you have to consider and think about, while you're diving, depending on whether it's on scuba or on like a rebreather, breathing O2. But yeah, for the most of my platoons I was on, or I was in charge of the dive team. And then, like I said, normally a vehicle team that would kind of specialize in the desert, long range desert movements.
Now, the guys that rock like not anymore, but back in the day, they rocked the silver dive bubbles. Those were scuba, right? That was just scuba?
So that's when that bubble, and when I got we used to send Marines to Navy dive school, and they would go usually to Pearl Harbor, and just go to the standard Navy scuba diver school. And that was the kind of the first step for the Navy. The Navy obviously goes up into hard hat diving and various skill levels. So that was the standard until the rebreather came about, and that was probably in 1990 thereabouts. And even after that, we still wore the silver bubble for quite a while, until the Marine Corps decided to create what's now the gold bubble. That's so you only get the gold bubble if you're a combatant diver, and that means that you're trained in the rebreather. So in the early days, the Marines who were only trained in scuba were able to go through they didn't have to go back to scuba school, right, or the dive school. They were able to just get trained on that, and once they were certified, they were eligible to wear the gold bubble.
Nice. That's I've heard some horror stories about guys, especially pre-dive. I've heard pre-dive. A lot of guys have told me that pre-dive is worse than dive school because they want to make sure you make it through dive school.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like with a lot of things. Like when before I went to sniper school, the pre-sniper school was to weed out anybody that wasn't going to make it. Right, and dive school is the same, because there's limited quotas to have the opportunity to go to dive school. So you want to make sure that you pick people that are definitely going to pass. So I had the misfortune of going through twice. Passed both times, but there was the first one I went through was really bad. I mean, it was really physically oriented. And then after we finished, for some reason we didn't have as many slots as we thought. So I did not get to go because I was a newer guy. And then they were like, hey, well, there's another dive class that starts in January. So we're going to put you through pre-scuba again.
You're probably like, damn it.
Yeah. The second one that I went through was much more academically oriented. And that really, for me, was I didn't understand it at the time, but you're learning physics, right? You kind of have to know quite a bit of dive physics. There's a lot of gas laws and how a gas operates at, depending on the temperature, pressure, and volume that it's at, and the pressure being whether you're under the surface and how far you are under the surface. So there was a whole lot of academic rigor and math, and that's kind of why I joined the Marine Corps, because I didn't want to do math. So
messed that one up.
Luckily I was able to between and I talk about this all the time, between being a sniper, there's a whole lot of math involved there. Mm-hmm. Being a breacher, trying to calculate the net weight of explosives is pretty mathematically stringent. And being a jump master, making sure that when you throw a guy out of an airplane, he lands in the right spot. So I wound up doing a lot more math than if I would have just gone to college, I think.
Yeah, I was actually on someone else's podcast the other day, and I was talking about it, how, like, as a forward observer, people think, oh, I could do call for fire. Like, that's, I can do that. And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't make you a forward observer, though, because we're doing a lot more than that. We're doing stuff like, I was telling them, like, a specific thing that we learn is, like, trying to engage a moving target with artillery. We're going to look at a convoy going down the road. We're going to measure the convoy with the mills on our binos, and then we're going to translate those mills into the actual length of the convoy. We're going to send that to the FDC. We're also going to give them the direction of travel, what angle that they're traveling at. And then we're going to do, between us and them, the math to figure out what the trigger point is. So we know this convoy that is this length is traveling this fast because we measured it going from one point to another. Now we know its speed. And then we're going to calculate that it's going to be at this point at this time. So we need to shoot a linear artillery mission, at this certain trigger point. And it's like,
because time of flight's going to be this.
So when people are like, it doesn't matter the job you do. If it starts getting technical like that, you're going to have to do some math,
Yeah. And it's none of it's, it's crazy math, but there's just layer upon layer upon layer. With shooting, it's absolutely that way. When you start factoring how temperature, humidity, angle, all of these things impact bullet strike. It's the same with artillery, air, explosives. I mean, there's a lot that has to be thought about, and that's why. So you've got to have at least one or two guys in each platoon that are really kind of laser focused on sniping. They can get everybody else spun back up, but a couple of guys that are laser focused on breaching. And
exactly.
And they're the ones that at least come through and like check your work. Like, hey man, you totally forgot about this step. Oh yeah, that would have been bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember being on ship and I was doing a JFO course. I was teaching a JFO class on ship because we had nothing going on. And the Recon guys shared the same kind of office space that we did, so they would basically listen in on the classes. And I was teaching worm formula, the width equals range.
Range of meters.
Yeah. And the captain was like, worm formula? I haven't heard that in forever. And I'm like, yeah, we use it. It's like one of those things. You gotta understand it to do it. And I really appreciated that a lot of the Recon dudes, especially the guys that were JTAC qualified, they were like, man, we suck at this. Like, listen, I went to school like 2 years ago and I've gotten like 2 controls since then. Like, please spin me up. They were at least humble enough to be like, I'm not very good at this. The Angloco guys are the experts at this. Teach us to make us better, because we may actually use this kind of deal. And And I think that's where a lot of the guys kind of saw, you know, my guys that worked with the recon guys kind of saw that, like, oh, like we were talking about before, like these guys all have wave top knowledge of a lot of these skills, and they can do them if they get put in a position where they have to do them. But like you said, there's a few guys that are the experts at it, that are pros at each different thing, you know, and they kind of share that knowledge and everything. Yeah, we had a good working relationship with our guys, because with the recon detachment on our ship, because of that right there. You know, we would teach classes on fire support and fire support planning, close air support, stuff like that. And then they would give classes on, you know, vehicle movements, clearing buildings and things like that. It was a really good time. Now let's move back into your actual deployments and stuff. You guys get back from Afghanistan. How long is it before you hear the rumblings for Iraq? And then, you know, at what point did you get tagged to go over?
So we got back in early 2002 from our deployment to Afghanistan, and it was, even on the way back, there was some rumblings that the Marine Corps was going to start a Special Operations Command unit. You know, it was, nobody quite believed it, but I got back. Going to spend a little more time at First Force, and then relatively quickly, I think by mid 2002, went to be an instructor. I had spent so much time, nearly 10 years at First Force Recon, and they were like, "Hey, you've got to do something." So the only thing that really appealed to me, and is something that would keep me close, was to go to the Special Operations Training Group, and I took over the 2 courses. We ran the urban reconnaissance and surveillance course, and the urban sniper course. So it was really an opportunity for me to take all the stuff that I'd learned on that deployment, you know, and, you know, look at the curriculum of that course kind of through a different lens. You know, one of the things that happens over time is, and like, you know, people might call them like training-isms or things like that. You know, when you're away from combat for a long time, you start doing things because they're a little bit easier, or, you know, they're easier to, they're more like logistically sustainable, or maybe it makes it easier for you to evaluate how a student's doing something. And these things kind of compile year upon year upon year. And then when you look at it, you know, kind of with fresh eyes, you realize that, hey, we're doing a lot of, you know, not dumb shit necessarily, but we're doing a lot of things that aren't the way combat works.
Yeah.
You know, things that aren't going to work in combat, or things that aren't really setting these guys up for success. So, you know, my first, and when I came, I brought over with me about half of my platoon. Not quite, but, you know, 3 or 4 of the Marines that had deployed with me, brought them over as instructors, and we said, hey, we're just going to dismantle this course and kind of rebuild them from the ground up. So a lot more focus on physical fitness, a lot of, you know, focus on combatives that hadn't been there before. When you're sending a very small team into a, you know, built up area, you know, somewhat you know, undercover, you know, or under you know, working in a, maybe not a hostile area, but a non necessarily friendly area. You know, you've really got to be able to take care of yourself, you know. So, you know, we implemented some, you know, hand-to-hand combat things that it kind of slipped away over the years because people got hurt or whatever. You know, we kind of just went back to the basics and said, what are all the things that we need guys to be really, really good at? You know, trying to get communication from a hotel room, you know, is challenging. You know, to set up a radio and get a radio signal, you know, with SATCOM or with high frequency communication is tough. You know, in a city where there's a whole lot going on. You know, how do you get photos and manage to gather information and send that information out. So I was only there for, actually, I think it was less than a year, but it was a lot of fun. You know, it was a great opportunity to kind of revamp some training and, you know, teach things that were going to help guys when they did deploy. and we weren't at that point really certain whether, obviously Iraq hadn't even kicked off yet. So when we kind of thought the war was nearly over,
Yeah.
in 2002, kind of Bush had already, kind of said, declared victory on the ship. We thought it was done, and I was super thrilled to have been able to play a part in it. And then, obviously that, hey, we're going to invade Iraq comes up, and that changed a lot of things, obviously. And that really, about that same time, started hearing the little louder rumblings that there was going to be a Marine Corps unit assigned to US SOCOM. And on one of the training events that I was out observing, the man, Colonel Coates, who would ultimately lead the unit, came up to me and said, "Hey, do you this? I'm going to be in charge of this thing. Do you want to be a part of it?" And that was a very quick yes.
Yeah. When you got to SOTG, were they open to changing the curriculum, or did you get some resistance from the people that have been there and instructing and stuff like that?
Not really, because I was in charge. So it was.
You took over as okay.
I was the chief instructor. So at this point, I was a gunny. So there was also, we were further away from the flagpole than the close quarter battle section of SOTG was. Mm-hmm. So you would certainly have had a little more difficulty coming in and just saying, "Hey, I'm going to change things there," because there was a whole lot more at stake safety wise. But from the reconnaissance side of the house, it was really going back to the basics, of setting down with, and I've got it somewhere as a copy of an amazing document that Recon Marines in Vietnam typed up. And it was just kind of best practices. And it was, some of it are things that we kind of take for granted today, but, like taping a punch rod to the handguards of your M16, so that if, around, you have an issue or you can't get a casing out, you're able to quickly get it out and get back in the fight. There was just a lot of these little tips and lessons learned, talk about camouflaging yourself, how to mix your camouflage paint with bug juice so that it would go on and stay on better. So, there was a lot of things, there was so much stuff that they learned then. And this, if I find it, I'll send it to you. It's just a great little booklet of lessons learned. I was, like they, we just said, "Hey, let's go back to the basics of reconnaissance." Most, regardless of whether you're in the, on a reconnaissance mission in the jungle or you're in a city, there are a whole lot of similarities. Let's think through why we're doing everything and see if it makes sense. And if it doesn't, then let's get rid of it. Mm-hmm. Let's not do things just because, that's the way we've always done it, which is my all-time most hated phrase in the world, or do it because it makes training easier. If it's, training's supposed to be fucking hard, right? Yeah. So, and we shouldn't be doing things because we want to make life easier on the instructors to evaluate. Mm-hmm. Let's make it hard on the instructors to evaluate, because every time you do that, you're getting better yourself. So it was really just, we rewrote every class, that we gave. We added a lot of things to it, lengthened the course, which is where I thought I would get some resistance, but it never came. And we really were able to, I think, make some great improvements on the course, on the urban reconnaissance course. The urban sniper course had been one of the favorite the training events that I had gone through, right? And I, really, we looked for ways to make that more realistic and relevant, and mm-hmm. I think we did a pretty good job.
Kind of a sidebar, but the Army hosts like an international sniping competition basically every year, and the Marine Corps sometimes does well, but sometimes doesn't. And what makes you think makes people do better in something like that? Is it excuse me, is that even like competition realistic at all, or I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Because it seems like every year when someone comes out, I think Coast Guard won one year, and everyone's like, "Oh, well, I thought the Marines were the best shooters," and everyone likes to talk shit to the Marines because they didn't win it or whatever. You know, what do you think keeps us from taking more wins and stuff like that?
I think, and not to knock, anybody that wins, but one of the things the Army particularly has the capability to do is, identify who they're going to send to this competition and just let them prepare for it for a long time, for 6 or 8 months. They do that with the best Ranger competition. Units will devote a lot of time and training and resources to 2 guys that they're going to send because they want to win. And I think, units that are local to the area, that have the opportunity to train, kind of in the same, on the same ranges, obviously have a leg up on the competition. There's a number of big sniper competitions throughout the U.S. each year. The Army runs or hosts. The National Guard has a really, really big one. And Marine Corps, we usually do pretty well, but not, it's rare that we win it. We've lately, MARSOC's been sending teams that have done, top 3 in a lot of them. But yeah, I think it comes down to the amount of time that people have to devote to training.
Yeah.
And how close the training replicates what's actually done in the competition.
Yeah, yeah. Have you taken part in any of those competitions?
Not, I think that only once I got to and I was just talking to somebody about it. H&K put on a counter sniper competition that I took part in. It's back in the 90s up in near DC. And it was really a great opportunity because there were a lot of special operations units from, the Canadians were there, the Brits, but there was Capitol Police snipers, Secret Service snipers. And it was, when we went up the Marine Corps, it was myself and another Marine named Dave Lind, who's actually the guy who brought our parachutes over into Afghanistan for us. He later lost both of his legs in combat.
Damn.
And does a great job still, like working to support veterans, particularly disabled veterans. But him and I went up, and the Marine Corps decided that if we were going to go up, they wanted us to shoot a new weapon that they were getting ready to field called the Designated Marksman Rifle, which was just really an M14. So we went up, got into a competition with weapons we'd never shot before. So we didn't do as well as we might have. But overall, the thing I absolutely learned from it, and the reason that I'm always a huge advocate of that, is anytime you can be around, other people from different services, different countries, with different training methods, different equipment, you're going to learn so much.
Yeah.
And that's what those things are really all about. You just see different ways. Every time we send a team to a competition, they come back and they're like, hey, the Brits were doing this thing, or the Brits had this piece of gear, or the Canadians were doing this. So it's a great opportunity to, with any, craft, right? Anything that you're trying to become a master level at, having a guild or whatever, having a guild meeting or a place where you can, kind of bump heads and learn new things is hugely valuable.
Yeah, especially because these are all, you're competing against, sister services and like international partners. So these are the people like you will probably work with in combat. So there's no reason not to like go and take the best ideas and bring them back home and promote them yourself, I think one competition that's really cool is the Recon Challenge that they do every year. That looks like such a ball buster. That's a pretty intense. It doesn't get the notoriety that like a Best Ranger competition does. Do they allow other services to send people to do the Recon Challenge or no?
I don't think they do. I'd hoped to make it out there this past year. It
was only a couple months ago, I think, right?
Yeah, to watch. And I'm really hoping to get out next year. It's relatively new. I think it's been going for less than 10 years, maybe. I could be wrong on that, but it doesn't have the lineage that the Best Ranger competition has of 30 years or more. But yeah, it's when I first retired, they were allowing retired recon Marines to participate in it. I'd heard that they've stopped that, and I don't know that I want to embarrass myself anymore. But I mean, it's the beauty of that one is I mean, it tests all of those skills that we're supposed to be the jacks of all trades at. And if you're going to win, you've really got to be kind of up on your game across the board. And it's interesting because almost every time it's relatively older guys that win. I mean, guys who are well into their 30s. That I mean, it's a lot of movement, a lot of endurance, and there's the requirement to operate while you're tired, wet and cold and hungry, and when you get to the performance on demand, which is one of the the requirements of being a reconnaissance Marine.
I'm sure that maturity helps, being a little older, been around the game a little bit, you know how to when to turn it on and when to turn it off. You can't sprint the entire competition, right? So you got to know when to do those things. I've been lucky enough to know multiple people that have won it, that I served with on 2 different 11th MU deployments, 2 of the 2 different recon detachments. Both have had guys that have gone and won the competition, which was really cool to kind of like see them in the paper and be like, oh shit, I used to know that guy, like kind of deal. So
yeah.
No, that's a big deal. I think it's cool. I really hope it gets bigger. And I think it's cool. The thing about like the Best Ranger competition is they allow all these other people to do it, but it's also, it's like big enough where they have like corporate sponsors and stuff. And the winners get like all kinds of stuff. Like I think they give them a handgun. They get like optics. They get, just like knives, like all this stuff. There's like, which that's not why you're doing the competition to win the prizes, but that is kind of cool to know that, like, you won, you get this custom pistol, with the engravings and all that.
Well, it used to be, what used to be televised on like ESPN2 or whatever.
I thought so. Okay, I thought it was.
And that was the requirement for that is that you just have to have gone through Ranger school. So that was another one that I was trying to to find another, because I had the chance to go to Ranger school many years ago, but to find another Marine who was Ranger qualified to do it with me, and that opportunity never presented itself. But the Rangers absolutely, they'll pick, each battalion will pick their guys very early, and they get they do nothing else but prepare and train and prep for that competition, because to win it is hey, 2nd battalion or whatever your battalion is a huge huge bragging rights for the year.
Yeah, for sure.
So and the best the Recon challenge has started to grow to that point where the Marines that do get some pretty good prizes, but I feel like over in the coming years that's only going to get bigger and bigger, and it raises money for the Recon Foundation, which is obviously an awesome thing.
Yeah,
I've been trying to push MARSOC to do something similar, but this hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I really like that the Recon Challenge, they make a focus of it on, their fallen teammates. Like everyone is racing in the name of someone else kind of deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great.
That's very cool, yeah.
The Recon and sniper communities are the best about maintaining their legacies and kind of like reinforcing that brotherhood, right? Like you said with the Recon Foundation. I mean, I see them on social media all the time. They're always doing stuff for Gold Star families. They're always doing stuff for that community. And they really like, I don't know, they keep that spirit alive, I think, even for guys that aren't in the community anymore. You know what I'm saying? And there's not many job fields or MOSs in the military that kind of hold their brothers up like the Recon and sniper communities do in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the great honor to be on the Scout Sniper Heritage Foundation board, and our latest, our kind of main focus is building at the Marine Corps Museum in Quantico a monument to the fallen snipers, and so that the website Scout Sniper Heritage Foundation.org, you can go on and buy a brick, and dedicate it to somebody, and that, funds for that will help, build this this memorial. But I think we've units that are hard to get into, you just by virtue of the training, you develop a brotherhood that's extends long after guys leave. Mm-hmm. So there's just what every other guy's been through, and to a more macro, I guess, look at it. I mean, it's like being a Marine. You run into another Marine, you've got a bond, all right, with that Marine, regardless of when they served or how long they served. There's somewhat of a bond there.
Yeah.
But it's kind of diluted because we've spent a lot of Marines over a lot of years. When you ramp that up a little bit to a very, very tight knit, small community that had to go through a lot to get where they were, then that bond is a lot tighter. Even if that Marine was in 2nd Force Recon and you were in 1st Force Recon, or they were in 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines Sniper Platoon when you were in 5th Marines. That's
I would say
shared misery, I guess.
Yeah, and I always thought it was interesting too, like when I was in, and especially when I was on the MEU and I worked with them more, the recon guys show a lot of respect to the battalion snipers, even though they're not recon guys, because they know they're school-trained snipers, and they're like, these dudes are legit. A lot of them have been to the same course, and it's like, I don't know, it just kind of seems like they're kind of brought into the fold a lot easier than you see like some of the other jobs and stuff that they work with. I will add, you know what? I'll throw in the links for your website into the show description. So if people want to buy a brick and help support that organization, they can do so. I think it's great stuff. I think the recon and sniper communities do such a good job. I remember when I was at Camp Lejeune, there was a gun shop right there on, not Western, that highway, was it 17 or whatever that goes by the main gate? Mm-hmm. There was like a gun shop, and it was owned by a Marine sniper, and they had like Marine sniper hats and stuff like that, but you couldn't buy anything unless you brought in your school cert saying that you had been to sniper school. They were very much like, you can't wear any of this gear, you can't buy this hat. I thought that was really interesting. I was like, man, it's got to be tough for business sometimes, but I get why you're doing it, because I'm sure you guys run into a lot of people that were like, yeah, I was a Marine sniper, and definitely not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of that going around. I don't. I mean, there are people that kind of make their live, spend their free time trying to discredit people, for wearing a hat that they don't. I've got better shit to do with my time than that, man. I mean, if that's what's going to, float your boat, to wear something that you don't deserve, then okay. I'm not going to lose sleep over that. But yeah, it's curious. I definitely wonder, what's going through your head. What makes you feel that wearing something is going to somehow or another kind of engender you to, or I don't know. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, do you know who Don Shipley is? You ever heard of Don Shipley?
Yes, I think he's the Stolen Valor guy.
He's the Navy SEAL that does Stolen Valor checks. Like, people will hit him up if they think this dude's lying about being a Navy SEAL, and he'll straight up call him up, and be like, "So, Bob, you said that you were a SEAL and you wanted to." And I think that's pretty funny. And I think, guys, there should be people like that calling people out. I don't get it, especially when it's like service members that served, but they did some other job, but they lie and say they did this other thing. They say they're a sniper. They say they're whatever. And it's like, bro, you were in the military, man. Be happy with that. Like, the real world, most people have no idea what the difference is anyway. So why are you lying? Yeah,
it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. And there should be, people doing that. I get, I've had the good fortune to have worked at the MARSOC schoolhouse since its inception. So I have a list of everybody who's ever graduated to become a Marine Raider. So I get hit up from time to time. Hey, this guy's resume says he's this or that. And I'll absolutely, reply, hey, he's legit or he's not. I'm not gonna or I don't have the time, I guess, to go around hunting people down and belittling them in public.
You could be the Don Shipley of the Marine Corps.
I could, like I said, I don't, and I'm not, discounting what he does. I think he made a job of it. He gets paid. Like, people pay him on Patreon to do that. I don't think he does it. He used to do it for free but it became so many requests that it was taking up a lot of his time. And he's like, you know what? I'll do it, but you got to pay like $50 or whatever it is on Patreon. And then I'll look into it, kind of deal, which I get, but yeah,
it's sad that industry has to even exist. Right.
Yeah. I mean, for us, we've only been in existence for 16 years. So we don't have that many people that have gone through. So it's relatively easy. With the SEALs, I can imagine that there's, it's a little more than just, looking at a list, right? There's got to be some detective work going into it. But yeah, I think one of the negative things that's become more common lately is veterans looking for ways to beat down other veterans for not being veteran enough, and I'm not talking about guys who are lying about things. I'm talking about guys who are, that hey, you weren't this, so you're not as much of a veteran as I am, or you weren't in combat, so you're not. Like, man, we're pretty small. We're a pretty small, tight knit community, or we should be. I think we could do a lot better, lifting each other up than trying to kick each other in the balls every chance we get. Yeah,
but that's the veteran community, though, right? That's just like that's like asking vets to watch a war movie and not point out things that are wrong. It's just not going to happen. Like, that's just the veteran community. They're going to call people out. Unfortunately, they're going to, denigrate people's service. If they didn't do as much cool stuff. The thing I've always said on the podcast is there's always someone cooler than you are. Doesn't matter what you ever did in the military. There's going to be another person that did more cool stuff, did crazier stuff, did more dangerous stuff, and if you're the guy that did the most dangerous, most cool, most whatever, you're probably paying the price a little bit on the mental health side because of all the cool shit you saw, the dangerous things that you did. That starts to eat away at you over time.
Yeah, there's no free lunch, and that's another, especially in the special operations community, sniper community, the recon community. I mean, I've had, I think in the last 2 months, 4 guys that I know that have killed themselves.
God damn.
That's, I mean, it's like hitting kind of epic proportions, and it's, those are guys that I know personally, that's not guys that I didn't know that well. So it's, there's definitely a price to be paid for people that kind of work at that level for extended periods of time.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get the suicide thing. I knew a guy, Major Zuppinger, recently committed suicide, and he was our OPSO on the MEU, or assistant OPSO on the MEU. Super good dude, one of the hardest workers on the MEU. Got beat up a lot by the more senior officers and shit, but that dude, and before that he was at LAR, and before that he was like an enlisted guy, and you hear about someone like that killing themselves and you're just like, damn, man, like, I don't know. I mean, I get if I'm like 80 and I have a terminal illness and it's like, well, the next 6 months of my life is going to be laying in a bed suffering. That's one thing. But when you hear about guys that are like in their early 30s and they have a family and stuff, it's like, obviously everyone's situation is different and everything, but it just seems so permanent. And like, I just don't get it. It's hard for me to wrap my head around,
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat, but it's it's something like last night I had a Marine that was out now that I spent time with as a civilian, just calling me up and like, hey, what the hell can we do? We've got to, and that's been like these calls are coming increasingly. I think people are at least starting to recognize that I don't know, we got to figure something out, because it's kind of hitting epidemic proportions.
The problem is there's not really much you can do, because once somebody makes that decision, like it's easy for them to do it. It's much harder for you to identify it and stop it than it is for them to be sitting in their living room one day and go, you know what, fuck this, it's over. I'm done with this, and pop, you know, or whatever, however they decide to do it. It's like, the best that we can do is just to remind people to reach out, you know, to other people, and not necessarily like if you're hurting, reach out to other people, but I always tell people, like, you should be reaching out to guys you haven't talked to in a long time just to say what's up. You know, shoot them a text, be like, hey man, been a while. I was thinking about you today. Hope you're doing well. You know, and that text message may never get a response. They maybe don't want to be associated with the military or military people anymore. That's fine. But at least they know someone's thinking about them. Or in a lot of cases, it may turn into a phone call that ends up being like a 2-hour phone call where you're reminiscing and catching up and thinking about stuff you haven't thought about in forever, and, you know, really brightening somebody's day, you know, and it's not hard to do something like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that that's something we should do more of. And I was talking with another former Marine who was, you know, frustrated with this. And, you know, one of the things that he brought up, and I hadn't thought of it through this lens before, but, you know, I call you and I think that maybe hey, I'm good. You know, I'm going to call you up and see how you're doing. You know, I'm telling you how awesome my life is, right? Oh no, I'm really good, man. But I'm worried about you. You know, what are your problems? That's not the way that we do things in the military. You know, we bitch, and we're, especially Marines, right? You're not happy unless you're bitching. So one of the, you know, the thing that he was talking about that kind of hit me was like, you know, when I call you up, you know, I need to be willing, you know, to kind of air some of my dirty laundry too.
Yeah.
You know, hey, my wife's on my last fucking nerve. My kids are assholes. My boss is a dick, whatever. Because, you know, that, you know, if I'm being vulnerable enough to, you know, to say, hey, my life's not perfect, then that might entice you to, you know, say the same. But if I call you up and I'm like, hey man, I'm great, but how are you? Then you're going to be like, oh man, yeah, I'm great too.
Yeah.
So
I think that's another way. I think that's another way where the Marine Recon Foundation and stuff, these organizations like that, do a really good job because they're so well organized, and they do enough people are sending them money and helping fund it that they can plan like reunions, and they can plan these things that bring people together. You know what I'm saying? Rather than hoping someone will reach out on their own and guys will link up. I think reunions and stuff should be a bigger focus of what guys do when they get out. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
every once in a while, get together with the homies and see how everybody's doing and help each other out. You identify Bob got out and, you know, he's having a tough time. He got divorced and now he lost his job. Like, that's a lot of red flags. Maybe we should bring Bob back into the fold and, you know, help him along to get him back up on his feet so he doesn't feel all this external pressure of life, you know?
Yeah. And some units do that really well. You know, it's some of them, you know, 2 years ago, I think I flew out to Vegas for a First Force Recon reunion, and it's kind of wide open from, you know, Vietnam guys to modern guys. And I mean, I knew a handful of the guys, but there were a lot of people I didn't know, but it really doesn't matter. You know, once you sit down and drink a beer and start talking to, you know, hey, it's cool to talk to a Vietnam era guy. But even guys that you don't know, you know, somebody that you know, it's probably a little more challenging in a, you know, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, you know, because you've got a massive lineage, you know, many years, you know, tons of people, but I still think there's value in it. And just as, you know, we're not joiners as much as we used to be. So like the VFWs are, you know, full of old guys. You know, I recently joined because I'm like, I feel like it's something that I should do. I still haven't actually been to one, but one of these days I'll get around to it. But, yeah. You know, I mean, there's one from the, you know, from veteran perspective, you know, throw in a little bit of money every year at an organization that does a lot to lobby for your, you know, your pay and benefits and rights is a good thing. Yeah. But you know, just getting to sit down with, you know, it's kind of cool, you know, get to sit down with people from different eras or different MOSs, and you know, the more you talk to them, the more you realize that you know, you should be, you know, people should be proud of their service regardless of what they did. You know, if you were an admin chief, a recruiter, whatever, you know, I mean, your service should be something that you're proud of and but it doesn't have to define you for the rest of your life. You know, I think that's where people run into mental issues, is when they're like, hey, the best of life has already passed me by. You know, I'm 30 years old, or 25 or 40, and it's all downhill from here. All right, it doesn't have to be. There's a lot of cool shit. Start a podcast, write a book. There's
start an organization. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think that is a big issue, is that guys are like, yeah, I've peaked. I'll never be this cool again. I'll never do those cool things that I did. It's unfortunate. I mean, I've had the same kind of thoughts before, where it's like, even trying to, if you're looking for a job in the real world, you kind of look at some of these jobs and it's like, why would I want to do that? It feels below you almost, because you've done all these other things. You're like, this, I don't know. I get people's frustrations and stuff. I just think, the big thing that people need to be doing is just reaching out. If you haven't talked to somebody in a long time, shoot them a text message, shoot them a call, shoot them an email, and just be like, hey man, been a minute. I was thinking about you today. Hope you're doing well. Reach out if you ever need anything. And you don't know how that could change somebody's life. That could be the saving grace for someone. So, let's move on to, so we didn't get too much. We talked about you getting into Det 1 on the last episode at the end, and working with Colonel Coates, and you got to pull in your own team and like build up a team and stuff. What was different about screening guys to come into Det 1 compared to like screening guys to join a force recon platoon?
So, in a force recon platoon, I never had the opportunity to pick. You kind of either joined the platoon as a young guy and stayed in that same platoon and kind of worked your way up the ranks, which is what I did. I joined a platoon, started out as a point man, became an element leader, a team leader, and then on the next deployment, deployed as a team leader. And you probably 50% of the team or the platoon would still be there for the next deployment. You get some new guys, you would just get divvied up. You really wasn't a whole lot of thought put into who's going to what team, unless they had a particular skill, right? Mm-hmm. So like, this guy's jump master, you don't have one, you're going to get him. Here we were starting from scratch, so it was but we were picking from largely known quantities. So we were picking from the kind of the cream of the crop within Force Recon, and primarily from within First Force Recon, because that's where all of us mostly came from. So that's kind of who we knew. So it was, we could have anybody that we picked, but they had to be, we couldn't pick a guy who was in the workup for a deployment and was already kind of locked in. So there was some restrictions, like I said, but we also looked at guys who had recently gotten out, and I wound up with two guys on my team that were out of the Marine Corps. So we called them up and said, hey, how's life treating you? You want to come back in? And both of them had gotten out before 9/11, and now they were, one of them was working at Lowe's. I think one of them was,
that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Parts store. And they were like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Working at Lowe's, you look at that and you're like, working at Lowe's, but that's a real world job outside of the military, yeah. They probably loved that phone call.
Yeah. There was, I think, a total of 4 that we contacted, and 3 of them, kind of dropped everything, came back in. The 4th guy wanted to, and I think it became a ultimatum with the wife. It's like, hey, it's either me or the Marine Corps, and she won out, and that probably for the best.
Yeah, because she's there forever, supposedly, right? And the Marine Corps is only temporary. Everybody gets out at some point.
Yeah.
Now, when the team's formed up, you guys are kind of, were you building TTPs? Were you building out? Were you building towards a specific mission, or were you guys just kind of getting a general, kind of structure to yourselves while the mission itself was still being developed?
Yeah, the latter. So we had no idea where we were deploying, how we'd be employed, what missions we were going to be given. I think looking at kind of reading the tea leaves, we decided that we thought we would go to Afghanistan, and we thought that we'd be doing primarily reconnaissance missions. So we spent a lot of time, training in places like Bridgeport in the mountains, doing kind of austere environments, doing long range reconnaissance missions, focusing on that. And while we were, I think it was one of the trips we were in Bridgeport, and we received word, or Colonel Coates may have got pulled back, and they decided that we were going to go to Iraq, and we would be operating as a task unit underneath the Navy SEAL task group. So that kind of changed, once we got back to Camp Pendleton from that training mission. We just re-looked at everything and realized that going there, we were going to be primarily tasked with direct action raids. So we went hot and heavy into preparing for that.
How much shooting were you doing to prepare for that? Like, were you shooting weekly, a couple times a month? Like, what did it look like? How many rounds do you think guys were putting into targets?
Wow. So we ran what was pretty close to a standard kind of force recon training workup. I think we shot more. I think we, over a span of about 8 weeks, like we probably shot about 10,000 rounds per man of 5.56, probably half that of 45. The first couple of weeks, just every day, all day on the range, getting really, really good and busting off all the rust at 50 meter and in, 100 meter in with the rifle, shooting with gas masks on, shooting with night. And then once we could kind of reach the point where we're happy there, then we started going into the shoot house. And those days you'll shoot a lot less, obviously, because there may be a target in the room, there may be multiple targets in the room, but not everybody that enters the room will be able to engage on a target. So we tried to set up, just through weeks of scenarios. So some of us would go in and set up the house, and we would bring in some outside instructors as well. And other teams would go through, clear it, then we'd set it all up, mix it up, do it again, and just cycle after cycle after cycle until you get to the point where it doesn't matter what's going on, in the building, in the room, how you have to get through whether you're going in a door or window or through a wall, through the roof. If there are hostages, not hostages, non-shoot targets, IEDs inside the building, you just have seen everything so many times that it kind of becomes a battle drill.
Yeah. Now, for something like that, that's obviously extremely dangerous training, and you have to ease your way into it. But I think if you're getting to the point where you're shooting 1,200 rounds a week out of different platforms, you're probably getting pretty good at working with your gun and stuff like that. Did you guys lose anyone? Did anyone get dropped from the team because of safety issues inside the house, or did you guys do a pretty good enough job screening on the front end where none of the guys weren't ever kind of considered dangerous, or you know what I'm saying? Did anybody get dropped for that, or was everybody already pretty good coming in?
Yeah, everybody had been through probably at least 2 or 3 of the Special Operations Training Group shooting packages previous to this. So we knew that everybody had done it before and had the capability to do it. Like I said, we were bringing in, because we had the money, right, to bring in kind of big names in the shooting world to help us improve our skills. We brought Larry Vickers out, who was, helped us change the way that we kind of looked at things. So there were a few occasions, I think. So we have a policy at Force Recon, in the platoons that I went through, that if you miss, or you shoot a target outside of the kill zone when you're going through a house, or if you shoot somebody that's not supposed to be shot, Right, there's a hill behind the house, a steep, really really steep hill that has a big cross at the top of it, and it's called Hostage Hill. And if you shoot one, you get one, right? And at the end of the day, in all your kit, you've got to run up that hill and write your name on the cross. I had done it, during my first shooting package, gone into a room. And so the targets that we would shoot at that point were mostly just paper targets, cartoon type targets, but they would have, their hand would be empty, but you could put a sticker on there that was an Uzi, right? Or you could put a sticker that's a bottle of Coke or a movie camera. And so they had a lot of these stickers that looked a whole lot like guns, like it might be a hairdryer, but it's black, right? And there's a lot of, so you really had to pay attention. And the reason for that is because, you're trained to, or the way your mind works, you come into a room expecting there to be a bad guy. And I think that's goes to a lot of the reason why there's a lot of like law enforcement involved, shootings of people that have a wallet in their hand, right? They're not, they don't have the time or the money or the ammunition to train them to a level that they probably, would be nice to train them to. So yeah, one of the first rooms I went into, I looked and I saw a gun and I shot the guy. And, then after we finished and come back and realized that it was a monkey wrench or it was something else entirely.
Yeah.
So I had paid my price of going up the hill. I think we had, one or two guys who had to make the trek, but, for the most part, everybody were no problem qualifying, to the standard that we held them to, which was pretty, extensive.
Yeah.
Really like a 3x5, in the head and in the chest, that's where all your rounds had to be, with rifle, pistol, from, like I said, shooting on the move, shooting multiple targets. It was some of the best. We were at the most highly trained I had certainly ever been. Yeah. And I think, I would have put us up against anybody at that point in time.
Yeah, Robert Keller and Tom Satterley are both Delta guys, and they've come on the show, and they talked about, how everyone thinks you're going to go to Delta and you're going to get a peek behind the curtain and it's going to be all this crazy like training and da-da-da-da-da. And they're like, the reality is it's all brilliance in the basics. They're like, we spend 5 hours at the range doing nothing but unholstering a pistol and doing dry fire. Just to get used to unholstering the pistol and pulling the trigger, sight alignment, sight picture. And the whole point of it is you get to the point where you can shoot at anything in a room and hit it while also scanning ahead and seeing what you have to do next, looking at hands, looking at identifying those things in the hand so you're not accidentally shooting someone holding a black blow dryer or something like that. Is that kind of the same with you guys, do you think, where it's like it just has to be consistently good at the basics to get to this level of what the Marine Corps advertises as surgical shooters? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think and I've seen this, the higher level or, tier that you go up, the people are just, absolutely fanatical about the basics. Right, mission planning, pre combat inspections and checks, rehearsals. You're doing it not until you get it right, but doing it until you can't get it wrong. Is really the thing that we would hear, the kind of mantra we would hear over and over again. There's, most special operations are really that way because they, you can't afford to screw them up. All right, yeah. There's political sensitivity, there's obviously physical risk, there's deniability, there's all these other things, but the skills that it takes to execute it are the basic skills of the infantryman, right? For the most part, right? There's obviously some things layered on top of those, but that's the thing, you don't start layering other things on top of it until you've got a solid foundation in being able to shoot, move, communicate, medicate.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So let's talk about the actual deployment itself then. So you guys get the team ready, you get trained up, ready to go. what did they end up saying? Like, here's our mission and here's where we're going. And I guess kind of go into it from there.
Right. So we were, like I said, we were going to Iraq, and we were going to work underneath a Navy SEAL task group. So that's TG1, the task group 1, and underneath them we were SEAL Task Unit Raider. So we're drawing our lineage, back to the World War II Raiders. We were assigned, our area was going to be in Baghdad, kind of co-located with the task group. One of the things that really had set us apart when we built Detachment 1 was that we had, in addition to the roughly 30 of us that made the kind of the shooter platoon, we had about another 30 intel Marines. And these, from geospatial intelligence, human intelligence, signals intelligence, kind of all source fusion. We had an amazing intelligence apparatus. And then apart from that, we had some communications guys, some administrative guys, some mechanics, logistics guys. But we were really heavy on intel. So when we got into Iraq, the SEALs, who were the commander of the task group, said, I'm going to take some of your intel and spread the wealth, basically, because that wasn't the way that the SEALs operated. So the SEAL teams were kind of flung across Iraq without that capability of intelligence that we had, and we had it in kind of in spades. All right, so for my team, I had my own human intelligence guy, my own SIGINT guy, and GeoInt guy. So the commander was like, hey, we're gonna spread the wealth a little bit. So we lost a lot of our capabilities. So we weren't able to start fighting the way that we trained, because these assets were taken away from us. But and of course we were pissed at that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we quickly come to realize was that we now had our intel guys like embedded, all across Iraq. So, and these guys were all talking, and I think, very quickly we had the best intelligence picture, in the country, right? So we had guys working with, OGAs in the green zone in Baghdad. We had guys attached, all over the place. So they were just chatting back and forth about things they were seeing, and it really allowed us to develop a really, really good intel picture that led to our ability to start targeting high value targets pretty quickly.
Now, were you guys one, that's kind of wild that the SEALs, you would come in with a lack of intelligence assets into a combat zone like that, because that's, intelligence drives operations, right? So that's kind of funny. But when you
I wouldn't say that they came in the way that they always came in, but when we showed up and we had this, we had been deployed with like an unheard of capability. And I think they just recognized that, hey, let's, and I don't, like I said, and then I did, now I don't fault them for it. The commander, made his decision to employ his forces as he saw fit.
Mm-hmm.
So no heartburn about it. And like I said, ultimately it wound up certainly playing into our favor.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about going forward and doing these missions, take out, different high value targets or whatever, it was the majority of that in DA raids, direct action raids, or were you guys on any kind of like sniper missions? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, the preponderance was direct action raids. So using, sources that are human intelligence guys developed, or signals intelligence captures to identify when and where people were going to be, hitting them in the middle of the night, grabbing them, and then obviously grabbing all of the stuff around them. So computers and cell phones and information, papers, and, handing all that over to the intel guys who would pour through it all and figure things out and come up with more targets. And that's really the way that, ops and intel or drive each other.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, we hit a target, find some stuff, they figure some things out, give us another target. And we just kind of stair step like that. And that was the bulk of what we did. We did have a couple of opportunities to to do some kind of longer duration sniper coalition support operations. I led one in Najaf in 2004. But just this past week was the 20th anniversary of the Battle of Najaf, which seems wild to me. But yeah, and that was opportunity to reflect back on all of the skills that I was teaching guys in the urban sniper course and put them all to use. It wasn't and validate, in some cases, unvalidate things that I thought were right, but it was a really unique opportunity. And we were thinking back to big urban sniper battles had really not occurred since like Leningrad, Stalingrad. So it was thinking back to things that we'd read, snipers that we'd read about back then, and saying, hey, let's try this out, let's try these things out. And so that was a really cool time.
Yeah, it's Najaf is interesting because people don't really talk about that place very much. It's not like one of the big names like Ramadi, Fallujah, Baghdad. Obviously.
Yeah, it happened right before Fallujah. So I think that's probably why the Fallujah was kicking off, as that was ending, and it wound up not being as big of a fight as it could have been, because largely due to the special operations sniper teams, of which we were a part, but the SEALs had sniper teams there, the Army, SF, their coalition partners, the Polish, were really big. And we were able to move in and kind of ring the big mosque in Najaf, while the battalion landing team 1-4, I believe, was off in the cemetery, the biggest cemetery in the world. This massive, it's just insanely almost like a little city, with tunnels and tombs and narrow passageways and things like that. And there was some intense fighting in that. But the bulk of at least the brains of the outfit, the Mahdi army, were located inside the mosque. And because the mosque was the third holiest site for Shias, it's like absolutely could not be damaged. So because of that, there was only precision fires allowed, kind of in a 10-block radius of that. And so we were, like I said, snipers primarily were allowed, and we were able to, over the course of a couple of weeks, trit a large percentage of at least the leadership of the force. And that ultimately led to them kind of turning their weapons in and quitting the fight.
That's a very clean way of saying that you went out and sniped a bunch of dudes, trit their leadership. Yeah, I got to that point in the book, and it was you said, or they said in the book, that what you explained, like conventional forces are only allowed within a certain range of it because of the sensitivity of the actual mosque. You don't want to, it's obviously that'd be an international incident if you drop like a JDAM or something on that thing.
Yeah.
Because I think you said it was like the third holiest site within that, within the religion. Yeah, I mean, but in the book you said when they brought you guys in, they allowed obviously more flexibility, but they also warned you like, hey, if you go beyond this point, you're kind of on your own. You have to be extremely careful. Can you kind of explain that? And I mean, how do you set yourself up in an urban area like that without getting identified? You know what I'm saying? It's very easy. Like people in their mind, they see like sniper movies or whatever, and it's like, a guy got into the house and he set up the little cloth and he, set up in the window and he's ready to go. The reality is you got to take over someone's compound and then do all this setup without anyone around knowing. And that's not an easy task. So how did you make that happen?
So in this case, the city was largely empty. Right, all of the non-combatants had fled, which helped out immensely. So we were able to jump in the back of a Bradley and have the army, the 1-7, I think, cavalry, drive us up as far as they were permitted to go. And they dropped us off, and that's kind of what they told us. They're like, hey man, we can't go any further than this. So if you guys get hit, make your way back here. So we did this, of course, at night, middle of the night, and let them move off, and then just kind of made our way on foot to we'd use satellite imagery to pick out a big building. And there weren't a ton of really tall buildings. It's a mistake to get into the highest point of the highest building, because that's obviously the most likely place for a sniper to be. But you obviously need to be somewhere high enough that gives you good vantage points. So we picked a building that looked like it had been a hotel or an apartment building. It was largely empty, but we moved into that. And the thing that you don't really think about is you've got to clear, every single floor of this building as you go up, which is, time consuming and tiring. Right. So we spent half the night, just clearing this building, making sure that it was secure up to the top, and then, figuring out ways to put like early warning devices down below. And then from the roof, myself and another Marine moved up onto the roof again at night, just to get the opportunity to be there when the sun came up, to see see what was going on. And roofs are tricky to shoot from. If you're not in the tallest building, then obviously there's room for somebody to look down on you, and you're relatively exposed. So in this case, the roof had a lip, a pretty tall lip on it with little drainage holes knocked out that were pretty well suited for us to be able to see what we needed to see and remain pretty well concealed. And while we were doing that, our Marines the rest of the team were down in the rooms below doing that, setting up urban hides. Right. So, finding a way to get far enough back in the room where your muzzle's not sticking out, somebody can't see you, back in the shadows. These rooms, in a perfect world, we would have had curtains to observe through or shoot through, but there were no curtains in any of the structures, so you really couldn't add your own, right? So it really just came down to setting up the best position that we could, and then picking from there, picking the next position. So we would move every night to another building. Ultimately we got to about a block and a half from the mosque, and we're able to like I said, take care of a lot of targets in and around it that led to a pretty successful operation.
How did that work, though? I mean, so what are the ROEs in that kind of situation? Or do you have like a list of individuals that you're looking for with like imagery so you know who they are? Or are you looking just for, so-called nefarious activities? Like and before you shoot, are you, as a guy on the roof and you see something, can you just shoot? Or are you requesting permission every time? How's that work?
Yeah, in this situation, like I said, the bulk of what we consider non-combatants were expected to be gone. So there's a term that's like a legal term, I guess, when an area or a target site or whatever is declared hostile, that you can shoot anybody without provocation. And anybody in and around the mosque was declared hostile. Nearly everybody was, walking around there was carrying a weapon. Not all of them, but for the most part, they were. And anybody who was, walking around was, it was pretty easy to identify that they were up to no good, I guess.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a requirement to notify anybody or ask for permission. We just had the opportunity to engage as targets presented themselves. As
that happened, how did their pattern of life change? Because now they know, after a couple guys start getting smoked, they're like, oh shit, we're being watched by snipers. I imagine the way they moved around and exposed themselves became a little bit trickier for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. They were, the first morning was kind of open season, because they were smart enough to know that we were limited on how close we could get. What they didn't know is that, a bunch of snipers had just rolled into town. So the first morning when the sun came up, they were just kind of walking down streets, unaware and relatively very little security, very little, tactical countermeasures or anything of that nature. That changed, as soon as we started dropping bodies, and they became more wary. They started, moving back to, they quickly, and they're not dumb people at all. They, quickly moved back and realized that, hey, they can't see us back here. We're safe. We're safe here. And then, of course, so that night we would move forward, and then the sun would come up again. And that took a couple of days for that to sink in, that we weren't stationary.
Mm-hmm.
And they really did not like to move at night at all, which was, obviously we were prepared, to work either way, but very little movement at night, at least initially. A little bit later on, I think they thought that was a better way to get around, and we were able to. We had a couple of JTACs with us there, and so there were some times when we were able to bring in SIF gas on targets, especially at night, as long as it was deconflicted and far enough away from the mosque.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now this was. If I remember the timelines correctly, this is before that Marine sniper team got ambushed and killed, correct? Or dudes came into their hide at night and took out. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
That may have happened in 05 or 06. I could be.
I'm pretty sure that was after that.
Now my question is, was that ever a concern that someone could come in, like you guys are focused on sniping guys and you're moving and all this stuff. Was there ever a concern like of being like ambushed, overrun, someone sneaking in on your positions? Because, you're talking about being on top of a hotel or something like that. There's a lot of space in that hotel for dudes to maneuver through without you ever knowing about it.
Yeah. We, for one, we had a relatively large team. I think I had 8 or 9 guys. Okay. So we were, rotating through, providing security. For a while, we were able to borrow some soldiers from the 17 Cav that helped us out providing security. But, one of the things that early on we started putting our heads together and came back to was, putting broken glass, taking big fluorescent light bulbs and breaking them, on the stairs, so that somebody coming up has got to make some noise. Mm-hmm. You trip wires and things like that. Coke cans on a string with a tripwire. So we used a lot of really old school techniques. I mean, nowadays there's a lot of, very small sensors and cameras and things like that people can use. But it was very, very low tech. But fortunately, it was never, nobody ever tried to come up.
No one ever tried to push your position or anything? That's good.
No.
Now, coming from this, I mean, that's obviously, sounds like you guys did a lot of actual sniper work there. Were there any lessons learned from that kind of deployment, from that kind of engagement that you brought back and spread, the word to other sniper teams within the Marine Corps or military in general?
Yeah, absolutely. We came back, and I had been, before we left, as I had spent time, like I mentioned, as a sniper instructor, I had spent probably more time than the average Force Recon guy had in a sniper platoon before I got to Force Recon. So I was kind of tagged as the lead sniper for the unit. So when we got back, we did the same thing, started just capturing all of the information, particularly, use of periscopes was something that had fallen out of favor. That was big, in World War II among snipers. It's almost, you don't see a sniper running around without a periscope anymore. Right, your ability to see without being seen is crucial. We had gone into Iraq with among the first optics with a Horus Vision reticle in it. Just a completely, the Marine Corps' snipers have always been very, very big on the inertial scope and the reticle and the inertial scope. That's like sacrilege to say that there's anything else. But before our deployment, we had run into some at a trade show, a guy named Todd Hodnett, who's since then, it's really become like the go-to guy in the world of long-range shooting. But he was working with this company called Horus Vision, and they had the guy that ran the company had developed a new way of putting a reticle pattern and a scope. Much more busy, but a whole lot going on. But it provided the ability to rapidly re-engage targets, to do a better job of range determination, to more quickly bring follow-up shots or shoot on moving targets. And with that, he had built at the time it was a little Palm Pilot with a ballistic programming in it, so you could kind of go through and let it do the math for you. So we came back with that as really the only snipers in the Marine Corps who would use this technology, and that has become absolutely ubiquitous across the Marine Corps now. So now the scopes that are issued come with that reticle pattern, and the software is kind of in use everywhere. So that was one of the a great demonstration of how a special operations unit can test things out on a proof of concept on a small scale, and then hand it over to conventional forces for use. So on that deployment, everything from we actually rebuilt the FISB kit that I was talking about, the full spectrum battle equipment kit, with lighter plates, better plates that would stop more hits of API ammo, new optics, suppressors on our the M4s, and just so many things that we were able to take from other soft units or things that we had access to because we were under Special Operations Command, and transfer those when we got back to the Marine Corps. And a lot of those things are in use now.
Were you guys using the M40A2 at the time?
We had man, I should know this. I don't know if we might have A3s. We didn't do a lot of shooting, so we with the 40s because we took SR-25s or the Mark 11 55 or a 7.62 gas gun, but it looks like an M4, just bigger, right? So a suppressed night armament rifle, and we were the first guys to deploy with those as well within the Marine Corps. So that's where we put those the Horus Vision reticles on, and we carried those almost exclusively. The Sasser we used a little bit, the 50 cal sniper rifle, and we took, although it didn't get a whole lot of use, a 408 Shytac intervention sniper rifle, was just a massive 408 round that was absolutely accurate to a mile at least, but it was it's just too big and cumbersome for most of we weren't shooting that far. Most of our shots were within a couple hundred meters.
It's crazy when you think like rifle tech, you're like, these can't get any better. Like, we're at the peak. And then it's just it's just constant. Got the constant like improvement of optics, of, like you said, the ballistic computers, of like just the different things that you can do to make the rifle more accurate, to the point now where they have, what are they trying to say? Like, you have scopes that'll adjust the reticle as you're looking at a target, and you always put the reticle on the target, where normally you would offset for range, for wind, and all that, and it does the math for you and puts the reticle, so you just put it center every time. Like, I don't know, it's just crazy.
And that's what combat does, especially 20 years. There's just innovation after innovation after innovation. So there's absolutely a lot of downsides to 20 years of war, but there's also massive leap aheads in what we're capable of.
Do you think now, we look at the war in like Ukraine and and Azerbaijan and stuff like that, where these drones are becoming, or are like huge parts of it, is it slowly like negating the need for like a sniper because it's doing a similar job where it's finding targets and taking them out with pinpoint precision? Or, it's got to be kind of a weird world right now for recon and snipers, to kind of find their way in this world that drones and stuff are kind of taking over, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the Marine Corps thinks so because they've done away with the sniper platoons. But yeah, it absolutely forces us to rethink, everything. But I think, people said the same, when night vision came around. They said the same. There's always been a requirement for, guys with boots on the ground to get eyes on a target and identify it. I don't know that that'll change. Absolutely, the way that we do it will change. There's obviously a lot more use of unmanned aerial, vehicles by reconnaissance teams to better scout, gain better clarity and precision, and things like that, and the ability to target particular individuals. But yeah, I don't know that requirement will ever go away. Good, hard men that are well trained and ready to get close to the bad guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I mean, we kind of opened Pandora's box, right? When we started using like Switchblade, I remember when that was a thing in Afghanistan. For those that don't know what that is, it's like a little handheld pop-out drone. It pops out, shoots out, and a guy controls it, and it basically has like a grenade on the end of it that they just fly. It's a kamikaze drone. And that was kind of the first I'd ever heard of that. And now it's just so commonplace with all variants of drones. Everything from, I remember ISIS was using DJI drones that they had crafted like a device on the bottom to drop mortar rounds or drop grenades into positions and stuff. To, now we're using this first-person viewing drones that were like what you would see as like racing drones a couple of years ago are now being attached with weapon system. I saw a video. I posted a video on my Instagram page the other day where they dropped 2 anti-tank mines from a drone. And I'm like, man, you got to think the lift of that drone to even be able to carry something like that. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's good because it keeps guys from you're pulling people away from the danger. You're allowing the drone to go forward and do something rather than sending a person that could get killed. But at the same time, I also don't like watching videos where they're smoking dudes or they're like almost teasing them with the drones and stuff before they kill them. Or you got guys that are just like these drone operators that are like really lackadaisical about it. They're almost like they're playing a video game and it's a game to them. It takes away the humanity of it, which is kind of weird. I don't know. It's a very weird situation we're finding ourselves in right now,
Yeah, it is. And I think, one of the interesting things used to be that when it came to, guys or gals with PTSD, obviously the closer you were to the target, the more likely you were to have that, right? Pilots rarely did because they were at a large offset, and they didn't really see the carnage, I guess. But since drone pilots now have become very susceptible to it. So I mean, you're sitting in a room. There's a movie. It's not a very good movie, but it's on Netflix right now called The Land of Bad, and it's like 2 of the non-Thor Hemsworth brothers are in it, and it's a drone. Drones are flying around for the special operations team that's on a mission, and they've come to realize that drone pilots back in the States are getting PTSD from their operations, in a much different way than fighter pilots ever were. So it's really an unusual dynamic that we're seeing, and having I think the military as a whole has looked at, how do we recruit people specifically to do this thing? Recruiting video gamers that have killed bazillions of people in a video game. Does that translate to are we fucking up a new generation of people? I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, I think we used to kind of like tease, like if someone was a drone operator and said they had PTSD, we'd be like, okay, bro, must have been rough walking out of your trailer in Vegas and going to the casino. But then when you kind of think about it, you're like, man, if this dude's involved in actually like striking and killing people, it's got to be weird to get off work. I just smoked a couple terrorists. Now I'm going to get off work and go home and have dinner with my kids. You're living in 2 worlds at one time.
Yeah, one of the things with, and that's like a proven tactic, right? When to bring a unit home from combat to have a what they were calling third location decompression.
Yeah.
Bring them to some place as a stopover. In Vietnam, they'd like take you to Thailand or whatever and tell you to just run wild for, in Bangkok for a week.
Mm-hmm.
But someplace so there was a step between being in combat and being at your house. For the drone guys, they obviously don't have that, but they also, and I kind of like made fun of it as well. But then when you start realizing that some of these people are, a drone that's loitering, watching an objective for weeks, looking for a guy. So you're seeing the kids coming and going to school. You're seeing all of the activity that goes on. And when you're looking at somebody that doesn't know you're looking at them, you're not seeing the bad guy necessarily. And that doesn't mean that they're not a bad guy and don't deserve to die. But, you're seeing them taking a shit. You're seeing them, make breakfast for his kids, whatever he's doing. So it definitely puts a whole new spin on it that I don't think we're.
We did a strike one time when I was with 3-6, and we followed this guy for, like you're talking about, we followed him for a long time. And we were waiting for him to stop. He was on a motorbike. And we're like, all right, when he stops the vehicle, we're going to do the strike. And he drove it back to his house and like parked out front and was doing something. And while he was like parking it and getting off, the JTAC and everything's working it and giving clearance, and they shoot the Hellfire missile. And as the missile's on the way, you see this kid's dad, or this dad, his kid come out of the house, kind of like, oh, dad's home. Come out of the front door and and then boom, he gets smoked right in front of him. And initially we thought we hit the kid also. We're like, oh, I remember my OPSO going, fuck, did we just kill a kid? And, we're all sitting here like, oh, fuck. And we're watching for a second. We didn't hit the kid. But it was just like, none of us felt good about that. You know what I'm saying? Like, the dude deserved to get struck. His kid did not deserve to see his dad get fucking blown up right in front of him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Plus, we were going to be killing that kid in 10 or 15 years, because
of that. Yeah. He's now radicalized for sure.
If he wasn't already, and he probably was, but yeah, that's the nature of the beast, I guess.
Yeah, man. John, it's been a great episode. I really appreciate having you on. Everybody needs to go check out your book, Tough Rugged Bastards. We're going to have to do another episode because I know we've just scratched the surface. I have a million other questions I want to ask you, but we're over 2 hours already. Where can people find the book?
The book is by this time you see this, the book is out and it's available wherever you buy books. Absolutely on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Books A Million. Bookstores may or may not have it, but they can order it if order it for you. So yeah, I'd appreciate you. Pick up a copy if you like it. Leave a good review or leave a bad review, whatever you want to do.
Do you sell them? You have your own website, right? You sell them on your own site too, or no?
I don't. You can link to it. So I have the website jadailey.com. There's links that'll take you to all of those places.
Okay. Nice. All right. Well, people do that. I think they ought to check it out. It's a really interesting book, and I'm glad I've seen you go out on a couple other podcasts now. I see you're kind of making the rounds, and I'm glad people are picking up your story, and I'm hoping you're getting some traction there and getting the support from the community that you deserve. And then everyone can check out my website, jkramergraphics.com. My Instagram is Former Action Guys and Former Action News. And that's it, man. Really appreciate the convo.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.